Hello, everyone. We would like to invite us to all enter into a quick meditation for us to be grounded before we begin our session. So I invite us to be comfortable in our position, if we can allow ourselves to be upright, coming back to the awareness of our body, checking in if there's any tension in our shoulders, maybe our face, our jawline, our hands, our arms. If there's any tension, we just be aware of it, and I invite us to become mindful of our in-breath and out-breath. Our breathing is always with us. We don't have to put effort to our breathing. All we have to do is just be aware of the sensation of in-breath and out-breath. I invite us to recognize our in-breath as we breathe in, recognize our out-breath as we breathe out. Breathing in, I am aware this is an in-breath. Breathing out, I am aware this is an out-breath. This is in-breath, and this is out-breath. If our breath is long, let it be long. If our breath is short, let it be short. We don't need to force our breathing. We don't need to think about the breath. Let us feel the breath. As I breathe in, I follow my in-breath from the beginning to the end. As I breathe out, I follow my out-breath from the beginning to the end. Taking full refuge in in-breath, taking full refuge in out-breath. As I breathe in, I am aware of my body. As I breathe out, I relax my body. Aware of my whole body, I give permission to relax my whole body. In, aware of body. Out, relaxing my body. As I breathe in, aware of the calm that is present. As I breathe out, I give myself permission to be in ease. In, calm within, around. Out, ease in the present moment. As I breathe in, I'm aware of the sensation that is present within my body, within my feelings, and I name it. If it is presence, joy, or anger, frustration, I'm aware of it. As I breathe out, I embrace it. I allow it to bathe in the mindfulness of presence, in aware of my present moment state, out embracing. Breathing in, my mind is guided home to the presence in this body, in this breath. Breathing out, I'm arriving deeper into the present moment with each in and out breath. In, home in the body, out, arrived. Breathing in, I allow myself to rest in this silence. Breathing out, I enjoy resting in this silence. In, resting in silence. Out, I enjoy the silence. Breathing in, this in-breath is life. Breathing out, I am alive. In, life. Out, I am alive. I listen. This wonderful sound of the bell brings me home to the present moment. I listen. The rhythm of my breathing guides me home to my body. Thank you, everyone, for breathing together.
So, good morning to all of you, and hello again. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. Like, actually, the secret of today is that these two stars are here. As all of you, I have been in many situations in my life, surrounded by many different conditions. But if there ever was the ideal situation under ideal conditions, is to have two Plum Village monastics side by side with me. So I am very happy today, and I feel very honored and privileged. We have here today, in representation of the much broader Plum Village community, we have Brother Phap, also known as Brother Spirit, one of the wonderful Dharma teachers in the Plum Village community. Those of you who have been there know that he is not known for short Dharma talks, but definitely transformational teaching. So thank you. It's a privilege to have you here, Brother Phap. And I'm going to keep you on time, by the way. And we have Brother Phap that has guided us in a beautiful starting meditation, who is the abbot of Plum Village and also one of our distinguished Dharma teachers. And thank you very much for coming, as I say, in representation for a very broad Plum Village community that I was incredibly blessed to be guided, nodded to, nudged to, something, and where I have been a student for over a decade. So today we were assigned a title. I think it's Eco-Grief and Climate Action. Now, in good Latin American style, we take instructions as good suggestions, but nothing that we have to do. So here's the framing that I would like to invite us to today. Throughout the time that we have been here together at the Skoll World Forum, we have witnessed incredible presentations and proofs, if you will, of passionate, brilliant, transformative social innovation, commitment, if you will, stubbornness, which is one of my favorite words, stubbornness to not bow down to the conditions that we have. And it has been truly remarkable I think for all of us to be reminded that, yes, the headlines are X, Y, Z, but there is also this very vibrant community around the world. And so it is with gratitude for that reminder that we're here today. At the same time, I have been wondering, and what is underneath all of this? If we peek under the hood, what is inside each of these fantastic people here at Skoll? What treasures, to borrow a word, what treasures are there, and what handbrakes are inside that don't let us yet stand in and stand up to the degree of the challenge? What is going on in there? And we had a beautiful session right here in this room yesterday, hosted by the Change Lab, and I see several people who were here and participating, and thank you so much for that. So I think that was a really good step into this exploration of our inner world and the relationship between our inner world and the outer world that we all share. So today, that's where we would like to go. Today, we invite you into going one level deeper from the other conversations that we're having into what I would almost want to organize as two buckets. And not surprisingly, they are two buckets of emotions, because that is what our internal world is all about. The first bucket that I would like to address is the one that is first on our lips when we say, "How are you?" And then we say, "comma, in this crazy world." Isn't that the question that we've all been asking each other? So the feelings that are underneath that, "How are you in this crazy world?" I think is a combination of astonishment, disbelief, because we can't believe that the news just continues to deteriorate. But even underneath the disbelief, there is anger and there is fear. There is fear about what is happening and what we think could come. And so that would be the first, let's say, family of emotions that I would love us to get into. What is a better answer to the question, "How are you in this crazy world?" Instead of just saying, "Well, okay, no. How do we really answer that question for ourselves? The second question that I would like to invite us into is a little bit closer to the instructions that we got, because sometimes we have to be obedient. And it has to do with the emotions that arise for us when we witness and partake of the ongoing destruction of nature. And those emotions have to do with a family of emotions that have to do with grief, despair, pain, witnessing of the loss. So those are the two families of emotions that are not disconnected, by the way. So we will explore that, but just to organize the conversation a little bit. I wanted to start with the one that is top of mind for all of us, because if we read the news, then we do fall into this, as I said before, this disbelief, the fear, the anger. How is this possible? How are we ever going to get out of this? Why is nobody standing up? Where is this going to lead? And all of that is about fear and anger. So I would like to, and I don't know who wants to step in first, but love to hear from the two of you brothers. You're just as aware of the kinds of news that we have, the tendency toward authoritarianism, not only in the United States, but elsewhere, and the daily news that supports this. What do we do with those emotions that come up every time that we're aware of one more step in that direction?
Right. Thank you, Christiana. Let's see where this takes us. I think the first step for me as a mammal, right, because we're also mammals, we think of ourselves as human beings, but there's many ways to see ourselves, and how we see ourselves and how we see the world is relevant. It has an impact on what it is that we see and how we respond. So the first step for me is to be very honest about the fact that as a mammal, I have a nervous system that responds in certain ways to bad news. And I need to be with that reality, first of all. I need to have the courage to feel what it is that I'm feeling. A lot of our lives is, unfortunately, structured around running away from uncomfortable feelings, pain, anger, shame, jealousy, rage, despair, grief, all these. We don't like it. basically. It's not pleasant. So we want to go in a direction where we think we're not going to feel those things. If I could sum up to you, in a sense, the entirety of the Buddhist tradition, like the wisdom that we receive from this ancient tradition, it's don't do that. It's do the other thing. Go towards it.
In those words, by the way, don't do that?
Exactly like that. No, I'm serious. It's one of the shortest summations of the teachings. Is, the good things, do them. The bad things, don't do them. Purify your mind, and you will transcend birth and death.
In those words,
that's it.
Definite.
Done.
Good interpretation of a sutra.
So what does it mean to turn towards the thing that we don't like to feel? It doesn't feel intuitive, actually, to do that. There are many levels of potentially seemingly contradictory truth here. So on one level, when things are bad, we also feel a kind of moral obligation to feel bad, right? We're like, if I'm not feeling bad, then it means I'm disconnected, I'm spiritually bypassing, or I'm ignoring the reality. So we're running from the painful feelings, but we also feel like we should feel those painful feelings. Okay, so these two things are already, kind of mutually opposed. So our tradition says, well, first of all, we need to turn towards the painful feelings and learn to be comfortable with our own discomfort. Learn to settle into it, to learn non-fear of those painful feelings, to befriend them, to know that with our breath, with our community, it's okay to feel those things. Those painful feelings can be so overwhelming that it feels like life-threatening. If I allow myself to feel that, I will go into shock. I will not survive, especially if we have a history of trauma, personally or in our community or in our ancestry, individually, collectively. And the truth is, we all have a history of trauma at some level. So those feelings, they feel deadly. So of course we don't want to feel them. So we have to have this kind of titration. I learned by my practice of meditation to gradually know that it's okay. I can feel this. And you know what? I'm not dead. Wow. It's like I had a hypothesis. This is deadly. But then I do the experiment. Okay, I'm going to do it for 3 breaths. I'm going to feel this awful thing that I don't want to feel. Don't like it. Don't like it. Don't like it. But it's okay. And then I check. What's the result of the experiment? I'm not dead. That's an experiment that you can do. Right? We need to be scientific about this. You run the experiment and then you say, well, what if I could stay with that feeling for 10 breaths? And you find that you can. And what seemed unbearable, seemed impossible to live with, turns out to be possible to live with. A very, very important component of this is to drop the story. Right? Because the story, as long as we try to solve the problem at the level of the story, at the level of narrative, which is, unfortunately, the level that we work at a lot of the time, for me, the evidence is that we've tried that, it didn't work. Honestly, I'm sorry, it's like bad news maybe, but I think we've really tried that. We tried to argue and debate, and is it this or is it that? Should we do this? I think we need to acknowledge the biological reality of our bodies and our nervous system, So our nervous system doesn't care what caused the painful feeling. It doesn't matter. We need to take care of the feeling as a feeling in the felt sense reality of our present moment. And we can do that. We know how to do that. But we need to be, it's a certain kind of discipline. Because that story, you say, okay, I'm going to drop the story. And then 1 second later, it's back. Yeah, but they said this, and then and I read about this, and this is unjust, and how dare they? And so it's like, oh, drop it again. And again, and again, about 1 million times a minute. Until we actually start feeling. The problem with our feelings is that they are partly caused by the news, and partly caused by everything else, by this depth, all these layers of pain in our own lives, in our childhood, in our relationships, in our ancestors, in our country, in the living world. Because we're not just human. The pain that we feel is also the pain of the world. So, we have the tendency to see ourselves as humans, but it's just a habit, right? It's not really true. It's just a frame. So, to really the pain that we feel, I would say usually it's 5% the headline, the story. It seems like it's 95% the thing that happened, but to me it's about 5%. So when I embrace that, when I take care of that with the discipline of drop it, don't feed it, because that headline is feeding it. It's making it worse, and I am committed to not making things worse. That's my first commitment. So I want to say, like, this nervous system, this local manifestation of the field of all life and consciousness has a duty to metabolize this feeling. There is wisdom in the way that this feeling manifests, and my role, my responsibility is to be with it fearlessly, to allow myself to feel all the depth of that pain without drowning in it. Okay, this doesn't mean like drowning in it and getting lost in it, because I've dropped the story and I have the stability and the strength of also the more than human world. I'm embracing that feeling not just as me, because if I did that, I would drown. I would not survive that. So I embraced the feeling as the earth. Because Mother Earth, she can hold it. And that's what we are. We are Mother Earth. And so we have that strength, we have that vastness, we have that capacity. So when we do that, then, okay, so I'm going to shortcut, right? That's some work, right? It's not like, done and dusted. That will take practice, that will take cultivation, take an environment, a community, a lot of support, practices. There's details there, okay, but let's just, fast forward a little bit. When we learn to do that, then we come back to the story, right? I'm not saying don't deal with it, but I'm saying come back to it once we have metabolized the pain. So we come back to it without that feeling of desperation, of overwhelm, of panic. We come back to it with clarity and strength and with a different view. Because the view from planet Earth is that political regimes are subject to fall. They don't last. The ones that we like and the ones that we don't like. None of them last. They come and they go. In the context of a human life, it looks like, it's lasting too long. But from the cosmic perspective, it's okay. And the question of scale is important. Like, where do we position ourselves in terms of what we see ourselves? If I am at the 1 meter scale, I see myself as a human being with this body, and the time scale is, days and weeks and years, but that's just one way of looking. I can also zoom out in space and time, and that gives me a kind of freedom from the panic of this moment, but not bypassing this moment, not like running away from it. So it's like I can bring that freedom, that immensity, to this now. So we can treat the urgency of the now with the freedom of eternity. And so it's like to stay in the game, but you bring something totally different. You bring this depth of ancestral time, lifetime, cosmic time, and you stay engaged, but from a totally different space. I'm going to stop there.
Speaking of time.
Yes.
Thank you. What would you like to add to that?
I think what I would like to add to that is the tendency for us to do is very strong. And it is important to do, it's important to be in action, and none of us, we lack that, especially in this community. But one other way of looking at our contribution in the Buddhist or in the way of our tradition, it's the quality of being is very important. So doing and being, we're good at doing. We're very good at doing, and that is a way of running away from the feelings, running away from the sense of also belonging in a way. So our practice, one of the hardest training in the resilience that we can develop is coming inwards. It's coming back to the body. So the exercises that we were doing just before we start this session was learning to become aware of the breath. So simple, but at a core level, this is our foundation of life. How many of us work on a computer 7-8 hours? During my teacher's lifetime, he used to say, I see you work 4 hours a day on your computer, and now we are working 12 hours a day on our computer. How many of us forget that we have a body? And our body stores all of these feelings and conditions and trauma and experiences. So the fundamental place of arriving to be with the feelings is to come back to the body. And this is a very foundational, but at the same time, it is the language of love that we can offer to ourselves. When you can be aware of the tension that you're holding in your shoulders, in your face, in your body, and you have the agency to just say, I am angry, and I am holding a lot of tension in my body, and I am going to give myself permission to release this tension, because this is inner energy that we are taking care of and transforming. And the doing that we offer is a source of energy that we give out. So by coming to be with the anger, you get to encounter another energy, which is compassion. When we look into anger, anger doesn't arise alone. I see something that is done that is wrong, injustice, pain, suffering. I have anger because there is love that is also present, because I want to transform the pain and the suffering. And so in that moment, we can identify that we are not only anger. I think a lot of the times we identify with only one emotion, but we are much more than one emotion. So when we reflect on this, we also have to recognize that each and every one of us, we do have the capacity to generate joy and happiness. I can share with you, when I first came to the monastery, I hated those two words, joy and happiness, because I didn't want to be a hippie. I wanted to be cool, and the cool kids weren't using those words. But as I enter into this path, and I've learned, our teacher would say that we have the responsibility to generate joy. We have the responsibility, and the suffering, we don't need, it will be given to us. But we, in space, in time, generational. But we have to have the responsibility to be aware that we have the ability to still see the miracle and wonders in the present moment. We can have suffering and we can have happiness at the same time. In our light, we see that suffering and happiness, they interrelate. Suffering is made of non-suffering element. But happiness is also made of non-happiness element. So a meditator, when we see a rose, we learn to see the beauty of the rose. We can smell the fragrance. But of the nature of impermanence in life, when the rose dies, when it returns to the earth, we're not afraid. Because of the organic system, the organic being, that it will regenerate and it will come back to life. So this is our way of looking at present moment suffering, present moment feelings and emotions, so that we don't be caught in a bubble in this present moment. And it's very easy to do that because headlines are headlines. And the inner work is to shine the light and say, yes, and I still have loved ones beside me. I will still hug you every time I see you.
Thank you.
Right? Because that is my responsibility. I want to be grateful for the present moment community that we have. Our tradition was born from war. And the mindfulness is very popular right now. It's very sexy. This is my childhood friends, they would say that. He's like, my name is, my childhood friend was like, you are way before your time. You enter into a career that now is so popular. I'm like, dude, you have no idea how much I've given up in life. But the real mindfulness is the practice of embracing suffering and transforming suffering. But in the suffering, we don't forget about the joy of life. And in the wartime, when my teacher was going to villages with his community of activists, over 10,000, building villages one after another, even if they were being bombed again and again. And there was one particular village that kept getting bombed. And one day, one of his students came up to him and said, Thai means teacher in Vietnamese, Thai, is it worth it? If all the effort, resources we're going to give to this village, we know in 2 weeks it's going to be bombed. My teacher explained that was one of the most difficult times that he had to encounter because he was in front of despair. Despair with his community, his own students. And he also knows the fact that it will be bombed. And he said in that moment, he stopped. He didn't try to find a solution to please the moment. And he just put his hand on his stomach and he felt his breathing. And he wanted to just be with the despair in that present moment. Welcome it. Embrace it. And as he was encountering that despair, he recognized the feeling of despair that is arising, but there's another energy that is arising, and that is love in action. And he looked at his student and he said, absolutely. Because if we don't go, that is an act of giving up. And if we give up, everyone will give up. But if it is a kind action of even just bringing rice, bringing medicine, building a house that was destroyed 5 times. That is the language that I am still here for you. As humanity, we've heard so many times, we're in this together. But this is not words. This is presence. I will show up, even if it will be burnt down. Because that, in our language, is the bodhisattva vow. And each and every one of us have that capacity to be of service, to be of love in action. So this is a very crucial way to bring the sources of our grief into action. When my teacher died, I thought I was a monk for then, 21 years, so I shouldn't be caught up in my emotions. I had this very naive idea of a meditator. Solid as a mountain, nothing can move me. And the reality is, we're so human. We have to cry. We have to feel the grief of the present moment. And when I was shaming myself from crying, I just heard the voice inside of me saying that to grieve is okay. To grieve is to show up in a way to present love. And you can grieve in action. I wanted to cancel everything I had to do for 2022 because I didn't want to show up as a vulnerable human being. But I also heard this voice inside of me, and maybe it was the teacher, the wisdom that he has transmitted to me. He said, "You don't just sit there and cry. Go and put your grieving into action. Because what you've received from him, from me, what I've received from him, it can still be very alive in this moment. It is in the way I show up now. It's in the way I can offer a word of grounding, a word of understanding." So for me, when we have these feelings, it is like a bell of mindfulness. Whenever we hear the sound of the bell in our tradition, we all pause and we listen. So when this emotion arises, I want to listen to it. And to be free from it also, because I don't want to be fully drowning in it. But with the breathing, with the awareness, I have a life jacket. I know the path I can go towards. So this is where I feel it's so essential. I would want to say that our century, I'm just echoing the voice of my teacher, but with all the suffering that we are encountering and we will continue to encounter, we need a spiritual dimension. And I would like to say a spiritual dimension doesn't mean in a temple, in a church, on a cushion, folded legs. A spiritual dimension is the ability to feel, to be aware, and to go beyond an emotion and beyond just one moment. Because in our way of looking, we are a moment of the 3 times. The past, where it's present in the present moment, but this present moment is building the future.
Can you fold into that a relationship with the rest of nature? Because for Thai, both of you, you've already mentioned Mother Nature. You have made allusions to the rose. And nature is such a strong carrier of emotions, but also such a strong treasure trove of peace and love. So could you take what you just shared with us and fold nature into that?
I'm learning to see the interconnection of myself and nature in every moment. And this is a wisdom that we all actually have, and we just have to be reminded of. Our dualistic mindset, our mindset of dividing and splitting everything. We are human being, a tree is a tree. But when we look deeply inside of us, we cannot distinguish those non-human elements outside of us. So we are made of non-human elements. And that It's not just a wisdom, but it's a truth. So when I have that relationship, I learn to be much more aware of what I consume. My interrelation with being alive in the garden, in the concrete, even cities. And I can see how I am nature in itself, because the way I consume, the way I am relating to the outer form has a deep relationship to our ecosystem. It's because of our duality and our self-nature, which is like, I am just me. And as humans, we're very good at this. That's why we can extract, we can pollute without any feeling of guilt or shame. And we've lost and we've numbed ourselves to the point that we don't feel the grief when we see destruction in Mother Earth. And of course, I was fortunate to meet the teachings that taught me this interrelation. But on a core level, I feel that in society now, we have to bring this understanding from the beginning. And not just in education, but as family members, as uncle, aunts, as father, mother, our relationship to materialism has to change. There needs to be a layer of gratitude towards everything that we interrelate to. So in our practice, you know, when we sit on a cushion, we learn to bow to the cushion. It was so strange when I first came in. I'm like, why am I bowing to a cushion? But the insight is, thanks to the cushion, I can sit. I can meditate. I can have wisdom. That can be translated into everything that is presented in front of us. So to have this wonder of the forms that are there, and it's not just outside of us. And we have, in our tradition, we have poems for everything. When we drink water, there's a poem to it. Water comes from high sources. Water comes from deep in the earth. As I drink it, gratitude is developed deeply, because without water, I can't be alive. So this practice of, I want to put it really deep into practice, because having the buzzword of, you know, Mother Earth is our mother, I've heard it so many times, but I don't practice it. But every morning I wake up and I say 24 brand new hours are before me. I smile. That's the first act I'm going to do. We all have 24 brand new hours every day we wake up. Smile first. Your to-do list is your to-do list. But that present moment of being alive, that's you. That's your responsibility. How you smile to that moment is how you can smile to life. So part of our training is to fall back into love with Mother Earth every day on a very concrete level.
I am aware of the fact that I think this is the first time that we have this kind of a conversation without a leaf, without a flower, without a plant. So I just invite us to bring that in our minds right here. Dear friends, we could be here for another 5 days without moving, is that right? But sadly, that is not the reality that we have right now. So we would like to open for questions, if you will, for sharings, if you will, for perhaps what has come up for you during the past few minutes that you might want to share. And in good Thai tradition, questions, comments, and sharings are excellent, and they don't have to be terribly long. And may I say the same to our wonderful monastic. If there's a question, your answers will be brilliant and steeped in wisdom, and they don't have to be terribly long.
And can I say, you can answer too, Christiana.
Yes. Okay.
So it's not limited to the bald and brown only.
Okay. I saw a couple of hands over there. Where is the mic? Because, okay, the mic, okay, we have to follow the mic, so please make sure that your hands,
Yeah.
that the mic sees your hand, please.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. As I was thinking of what you were talking about, I was thinking of the blessing of being somewhat older and having some years of perspective. And it made me think of my children who are 9 and 12 and 15. And the 12-year in particular has a lot of fear around climate and doesn't have the years of perspective of like, things feel terrible, but then you see that that can change. So I just wondered if you have any advice. It's probably more of the same, but in particular of how to share some of this with children.
I'm the one who has children.
Please.
I actually just spoke about that this morning with someone else who asked the same question. Consistent with what we have just heard, I think it really behooves parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, adults in general, vis-a-vis generations that are coming, to first not hide what is happening from them. Not to not disguise the challenges that we're in, to be able, obviously, especially with small children, to interpret that in a way that they can take it in appropriately for their age, and that changes over time. But to always be truthful. To always be truthful so that they don't grow up and one day say, you didn't tell me. You lied to me. We do not want to betray their trust. Children have an innate trust in adults. We have to live up to that. So first, be truthful in an age-appropriate way. And at the same time, it seems to me that talking about climate change and about how we can bring ourselves to it is a very important life lesson for younger descendants or children, because as we have just heard, we have to break this dualistic thinking training that we have grown up with, that it's either this or that. The fact is, it's both. We are both in a planetary emergency. We're both facing challenges, and we can step up and into it. Both are true. It's not an either or. I will leave it at that, because otherwise I go into a long answer. And then here.
First of all, thank you so much for the beautiful offerings you've already gifted us. And my question is about this collective dimension of, like, we're not just individuals. You know, you beautifully spoke about, I embrace the feeling as the earth. And I would love to know how do you connect to the earth? Because, you know, many people, like, I grew up in a city, and if you would have told me that to me before, I would have been like, what? You know? And so we might encounter people who have that experience, and I would love to know, how do you do that, and what is your experience? Because I think that's the other thing. When we connect with others together, and when we all are aware of us as the earth, and as a collective we connect to that, there's a higher capacity that we have to digest what's there. So I'd love for you to speak to those two things. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I think, as you've heard from all of us, in our tradition, we really want to talk about not just the what, but the how. So your question really relates to that as well. For us, it's not enough to have, a kind of intellectual notion of interdependence. It's easy in a sense, right? That's not hard to get. Like we breathe air, the green things produce air, whether it's the algae or the trees, and So we're interrelated. It's sort of obvious, but it's not enough to get that intellectually. We actually have to feel it as a direct experience, as our lived reality. And it's true that sometimes it's not easy. And the more we live in kind of boxes with straight edges and, kind of the human-built environment, and the more we live in our screens, it can be that there's sort of a strong illusion of a human-only world. I think we really have to take seriously the fact that we mostly think of agency in terms of human agency. And when we think about solving the big problems, the structural problems of climate change, or all the intersecting crises of the polycrisis, we usually think that we are the actors. We're the ones who are going to do something. We're going to pull on the lever of carbon dioxide, or solar, albedo, or whatever, And I just think that's very hubristic. Like we actually don't know that. It's just a kind of assumption that we've habitually made. We're not sure that the forests aren't agentic, that they're acting, that the earth herself isn't sort of choosing, that she doesn't have agency of a kind. And in fact, if we have agency, we are the agency of the earth, right? So okay, I'm still talking in the what, but I'm now going to speak about the how. How to bring that awareness, that wisdom to life. Another aspect is to remember, it's not as hard as we think, because I think this blinkered vision of like human-only agency is very modern, actually. It's very recent. In terms of our whole evolution over 4.5 billion years, this idea of we're humans, we're acting is very recent. I don't know. 150 years, Industrial Revolution, who knows? I think for most of our life, for most of our history, we've lived with the innate awareness that everything is alive. Everything is spirit. It's I don't know, I feel like we're coming back towards animism, honestly. We're realizing again, even from the scientific point of view, it's starting to look more and more like everything's alive, and we're part of an unbroken tapestry. I'm still talking about the what. How? How do I make that real for myself? Okay, it's true that we don't have a leaf or a flower, but we do have this water. So this is just an example, but part of our practice, when we say practice, it means something that I can do every day. Maybe multiple times a day. Our teacher coined this beautiful word, interbeing. So it embodies the wisdom that we cannot be by ourselves alone, separate. And yet that is the belief, right? We act as if we exist, separate, individual. And so we have to have practices, many, many, many practices to relax that dominant concept, that notion that has kind of invaded and colonized our thinking, and not only our thinking, but our perceiving. So if we think in terms of separate beings and entities, and I am me, and I have a name, and look, I have a name badge and an ID card, and you can say when I was born, and personal attributes and this kind of thing. The habit of that has colonized my thinking, but also my perceiving. When I think in those terms, I also perceive in those terms. So I need to do a lot of kind of practice, work, to release that habit. So I want to learn to experience the world with the eyes, with the ears, with the senses of interbeing. So every time, if I remember, right, I drink water, I have an opportunity to see that this water is actually a condensate of clouds. You know how much cloud is in here? I actually calculated it one time, because our teacher talks about it all the time, but I was wondering, like, how much cloud would it take? So I don't know. It's probably not a very accurate calculation, but I think it was about 100 cubic meters per 10 milliliters, something like that. So it's like, I don't know how much that is, 20 milliliters, 50 milliliters? It's a big cloud. It would fill this room. It's bigger than this room. So all of that cloud is here. And when I drink, I'm drinking clouds. And I can feel it. And so I am cloud. And I can feel that. Right? So we use our imagination. It is, we actively engage our imagination. It's a little bit poetic, it's like you have to engage your creativity, your metaphorical mind. But then with the practice, you train that, you drill that every day. Every time you take a sip of tea, you take a sip of coffee. You also drink the mountains, the plants, the cultivation, the tradition, the culture. So all of these things come together. And so I'm not here just as me. I'm here as clouds and water cycle and, and also my ancestors and my culture. So there are many, many ways. That's just one, but there are many, many, many examples of this type of retraining of our fundamental concepts, which then influences our percepts, our perceptual mechanisms.
Are doing then.
Yes, exactly.
And then are doing.
It completely transforms our way of being and doing.
Thank you. Hello? Oh, there we go. I want to ask that, I don't know if it's all of you maybe having a think on this and saying a little bit, or maybe just one or two, I don't know, but I want to ask that you answer the second part of the title of this, which is To Climate Action, because I think a lot of people, and we see this, I work for a news organization, I work for Associated Press, we interview a lot of people who really talk about grief, who really talk about eco-anxiety and feeling paralyzed. And so I want to ask that each of you talk a little bit about taking some of what you've talked about here, of dealing with that pain, but then going to that second part of climate action. The practicality of that.
Yes, thank you. It is both practical and mystical at the same time, because it is, of course, about taking practical steps, and each of us has chosen a sphere in which to bring our influence, whether that is in nature or in different kinds of architecture or health or education or policy, and everybody has chosen their own sphere of influence, and we can and should all continue that. The difference is in the how. Sometimes the what, and sometimes we have friends who, when they understand what we are sharing, they go like, I don't want to do my job anymore, I want to change jobs. That's fine. But it's about the how. It is about how do we bring ourselves, our whole selves, including the cloud and the mountain, to the work that we do. Because if we don't do that, then we're doing mechanistic, transactional work. And this is not a moment for transactions. This is a moment to truly understand and act. It's not just a practice on the cushion. That's maybe where we start to train our mind a little bit differently. But it is about, how do I bring my presence to the same situation in a different way? So it's very much about the how. And it's about, let me give you a practical example. I have had in my life to bring many people, governments, stakeholders, etc., to some common agreement. If I walk in there and I just say, okay, what is my job here? I have to figure out where we're going to have, and that job is just one, but everybody has a different job. If I just take a very, with all respect for the work that we do, I'm going to use the word superficial, okay? And I apologize about that. But if I take a superficial interpretation of what is the work that I'm doing, and then go at it, it is by nature transactional and mechanical or mechanistic. If I take the exact same task and I understand this is a task that is fully aligned with who I am, with where I'm standing, with the moment in which we are, with all the capacity that is available. Now I step into that situation from a very different perspective. And the magic of that different presence that you bring to any task is that you don't have to talk about it. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to put it up in a PowerPoint. It is perceived. It is perceived by those with whom we are committed to working. And that perception leads to a very different collective how. And once the collective how changes from a mechanistic transactional, and you go to, and that's why I call it superficial, you go to another level of the same task. This is the brilliance of it. It's the same task. It's just that we are entering at another level. And by entering at another level, we are already inviting everyone else to join us at that level. And then here's the magic. I know you don't use the word magic. I do. Do. Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. The magic of that is that then the window of possibility of what can come out of that task opens. And so I don't walk into a room with a specific outcome that I want. No, non-attachment to outcome. What is the full spectrum of possibility that is there? And most often, I surprise myself, everyone else surprises themselves, because it's, how did we get to that? Because it was always there. That possibility was always there. But we were so attached to our, little briefing or to our little whatever, that we couldn't see beyond it. And once we raise that, once we say, actually, the possibilities are infinite, now the exploration becomes a beautiful exploration. And you come out at a very different, at a very different place, at a different pace, with a different level of commitment, which is much closer to what we need than the transactional mechanistic. I'm not sure if that was practical, but that's as close as I can come to it, yes.
Can I add
Please.
To that? Because I think this is a very important question, and this question comes up a lot in our retreats. So in a sense, so we give a lot of retreats for people in the climate space, and so in the first few days, we invite them to come back home to their bodies, to take care of their feelings, all of the things that we've been talking about, to train the eyes of interbeing, and so we're taking care of the how, and we're taking care of the human, the nervous systems and so on. And then at a certain point, they start kind of going, yeah, but what about systems change? What about action? Like, what are we going to do? And our point, so building on what Christiana said, for us, the how is a what. Right? So we are used to thinking of action in a limited way. But I know that our way of doing, our way of thinking, our way of perceiving is already action. Right? The way that you come into a room. If you're panicked, you're acting and you're influencing the space and you're not going to help. So we have to start taking seriously our emotional contribution to our work. So we know that we've got to do mitigation. We know that we have to do adaptation. But it's very, very important to really take seriously the fact that it's human beings who are going to be doing the mitigation and the adaptation. And if those human beings are overwhelmed and panicked and freaking out, they will not be able to do it. So we've got to welcome the nervous systems into the space of action and say, this is action. It is action to take care of our feelings. It is action to acknowledge our grief, to be real about it, and to transcend it, right? Not to drown in it, not to stay there and wallow in it, to get free, to get strong. You know, like when I say you can act as the earth, I'm talking about action, but when you come from that point of view, it's very different kind of action. And you know, to build on your question from before, it's like when you realize that that is what we are together, it also changes your view. Like, how can you be in competition with each other? You know, very often we're in these spaces, I mean, not us as monastics, but you know, a lot of the people we work with are in competition, more or less explicitly, for resources, for grants, for funding. When you come with that view, that becomes part of the space, you know? And we know that the earth herself doesn't work like that. You know, of course there's competition in nature, but there's so much more collaboration. Like we've been acting from an old story about evolution. And we've got to update. You know, we've got to get with the new science. There is so much more collaboration and interdependence and symbiosis. And we need to bring that into our ways of working as well. And that will change our action.
There was one last question up here. Sorry, who was the last? Last question to the lady in orange.
What I responsibly, sorry for the others. Hi, my name is Tuani. I'm from Brazil, and we're speaking, and I'm thinking about that on that climate agenda. I've been only like in the last, I think, 7 years in the COP, like in the last 5 years, but I've been born and a marginalized community in Brazil. So the most green person I ever met is my grandmother. She's the most sustainable person, not because she has that climate agenda because of the Paris Agreement, but because we need to survive, and that's nothing more sustainable than the surviving. But now seems like all the climate world agenda recognized us as a persons that suffering most in the global south, and you want to talk with us about it, want to mobilize everyone, but with an awful narrative that we are the last generation, the world is ending, and there is no more time. But we that living in this kind of situation, we already know that. I remember speaking with her grandma, and we talk about flooding and the level of the sea, and she was like, "Oh, is that the end of the world? Because my world is ended like 40 years ago, because every summer, that's what's happened with our community, so okay, ending the world. We have been experienced that, you can relate to that." And my question is going in this direction. How can you how can create a global movement? And in Brazil, you are facing that because COP30 is going to be there and people are more open. And how can you make that climate movement about all this climate crisis, given the urgency, but not the urgency that buries people hope, but create and cultivate that resilience? Because we that live in this, we don't want to all time listen about it because you already have experienced that. You need to talk about solutions because that's what you want, and that's what we've been doing in the last all time that we live. Despite what happens, we keep being surviving and creating solutions. So how all that climate international agenda meets what you believe in, and how can you get a common point, but not burying what we've been doing, not burying hope, but making agenda that's progressive and really resilience.
That's a question to everyone.
That's a question. Yeah. Go for it.
No, you
You go and I'll finish it. Okay.
Yeah.
First question, what are you doing between the 4th and the 10th of October of this year?
I don't know, but
Oh, I know.
call me.
So the reason why I ask is because your question represents a question that is being asked by many young and not so young people. And it is the question of the moment. It is the question of your generation, it's the question of my generation. That is the question. And so as a response, not the only, but a response to that question, several years ago, with the amazing wisdom and support of the Plum Village community, including the two brothers here, we started what we truly hope is going to become a movement, which is to invite. I'm getting all teary-eyed because your question goes straight to my heart. It is the most important work. So several years ago, we started the effort of inviting climate, biodiversity, ocean, environmental activists and leaders around the world who have that question. And thank you. That's very helpful. Most important prop ever for me. Who not only have the question, but where that question stems out of pain. And where the question stems out of frustration and anger and lack of understanding of why are we still in this mess. That is the mud that we all have our boots buried in. And so in order to support both the understanding of that mud, but also to begin to develop the capacity of having lotus flowers emerge from the mud, we started to invite continent by continent by continent leaders in the environmental space to a 1-week retreat that is facilitated by the Plum Village tradition monastics, to go into these concepts but much deeper, and to have the opportunity, not as an activist that belongs to this organization or is committed to XYZ task, just you as a human being, you as the beautiful expression of Mother Nature. You, how do you delve into that pain, and how do you metabolize it or compost it into the resilience, as you have said, your own personal resilience, so that you can go back out and work at planetary resilience. It is a magical week. You're hereby invited.
Don't say any more words.
And we believe, honestly, as someone who's been in the climate community and the climate challenge for decades, I really have come to the conclusion that if we don't change the how, if we don't change how we approach our task, if we don't change how I approach myself, if I don't change how I approach others, the task, the system, the organization, whatever, if I don't change the how that I carry around in me, because I am more a how than a what. I'm much more a how than I what. And so if I don't really understand that, and if I don't change the how that I am, and that determines how I interact with you, with organizations, with the world, we're just not going to get there. We're just not going to get there because we've been focusing on the what since 1992, if not before. And honestly, I really, really, really appreciate it. I'm so grateful and thankful for all the progress that we've done because we've had a lot of progress. But please, the progress is not at the pace and scale that we need. And we all know that. So something has to be done differently. And I happen to think this is what we have to do differently. We have to change this how. This how. And then we can change the rest of the how. And that allows us to go to much higher and deeper impact than, with full respect, myself being part of it, the superficial impact that we've had up until now. Because we've been transactional. We've been mechanistic. We haven't really gone at this from the depth that we ought to. And to finish with and that's why I gave the last word to the youth, because to wrap up the question about the children, that is our responsibility. Every single one of us here is already an ancestor. It doesn't matter how old you are. Even the youngest person here is already an ancestor. And our individual and collective responsibility as responsible ancestors is to open the space for the next generations to step into this space from a different perspective, not from the what driven, but from the how inspired. And that is the most important lesson that we can give our children. Yes, to be truthful about the challenges that we face. And how are we going to step in? The how was not taught to us. And it is time, as the ancestors that we are right now, for us to focus on the how and to show children from infancy. And I now have a 4-month-old grandson who is already learning about the how, because it's never too early to learn that the how really determines the what. With that, we come to a close. Would you like to close us?
Wow, yes. We started with a few breaths. Can we end with a few breaths together? Let us just allow ourselves to sink into our chair, our seats. Allow us to feel the feeling that we're all feeling in this moment. And name it for ourselves what it is. Allowing our body to be present, relax the tensions, embrace the ease, become aware of the breath. Breathing in, I know this is an in-breath. Breathing out, I know this is an out-breath. And this is in-breath, and this is out-breath. Breathing in, this breath is the breath of the past, and the breath of the present, and the breath of the future. And breathing out I transmit this awareness of breathing to myself and to the future. In a breath of space and time. Out a breath of continuation. Breathing in, I feel grateful to be breathing with a community. And breathing out, I enjoy breathing together as a community. In, breath of interbeing with community. Out, enjoying the breathing. Breathing in, the earth is breathing with me. Breathing out, this out-breath is the earth herself. Earth in my in-breath, I am the earth with my out-breath. Thank you, dear friends, dear community.